Welcome back to the Convo Couch, ladies and gentlemen. I am Pasta Jardula, and on the ones and twos is Jonny Tsunami. And today we have a special guest with us. We have the creator, founder, and the man of the MCSC network, the Mi Casa Su Casa network, the man who always helps you find your balance. Nico House is here.
What's going on, Pasta? I'm not gonna lie, I'm a little pissed because it's like the first time I'm on y'all's channel.
No,
This
it's
type of way
not.
about that.
Oh,
Yeah, it
stop it.
is. It
Come on
is.
now. We've
Well, that's how
collaborated
we at your
before.
house. Yeah,
Primetime
when I was.
Progressive.
Oh yeah, were we streaming on both channels? Well, yeah, when I'm in person, but that don't count. I'm talking about
No, we
satellite.
streamed. We did a show about Iran, about the Mossadegh.
What?
Yep. You were in
Was that
Florida. We were in Cali. And besides,
All
you've
right.
been on the couch.
That's true. That's true. That's true. What's
As
going
everybody
on, man?
knows, we are your sister channel. I say we're your sister channel, not your brother channel, because I have a lady and me an Italian grandma, so we have some ladies over here, and we're working it. But I wanted to
Shout out
have
to
you on today
Fiorella.
because I was watching your show the other day, and you had said something that just really caught my mind. And you had said that World War I was a regime change war. And I just remember that time you were over. I think we were covering the KDEMs. I don't know what we were. You were in town, and I was sitting
That was
down.
actually for Tulsi's rally. That was the first time we interviewed Tulsi.
I think so. That's the time. But Ernesto, who works for KPFK, and you guys just had this conversation about Cuba and Batista. And you just blew my mind. I just sat back because you said that he was a communist till the day he died. And the conversation
Yeah.
that took place, I felt like I had another history lesson right there. So when you said the other day, World War I was a regime change war, that's a conversation for another day. I was like, no, it's today because the bells went off in my head. And I said, I have to talk to Nico about this because I know Nico's going to have this great, interesting point about it. So,
Well, foreign policy and war and patterns of history is basically how I've been able to, successfully predict when something, whether we're being gaslighted or whether something may or may not be legitimate. Uh, and I know it's cliche, but it's a fact. Like you literally cannot know where you're going unless you know where
you
you've been,
came from.
especially when it comes to
Yeah.
U.S. history and understanding imperialism from a U.S. centric point of view.
All right. So here's what I have. I have my Addicted to War ready, which doesn't have a lot of stuff. I have my pad and my pen, getting ready for some history lesson with Professor House. But first, I have to ask you a question. I want to start off the show like this. And for everybody out there, if you have a question you want to join on in, go right ahead. We're going to probably save it towards the end. We're going to let Nico get going, talk his points, and then maybe we'll circle back the wagons. We'll digress to some questions, but I'll also write down some questions. But before we get started, I'm gonna lay out what happened in World War One, and just the basic what we learned in school, what we were taught, what we thought World War One was about, and then I'll let you go into your stuff. But I have to ask one important question as pertaining to today because I've seen this argument right now, and I've seen it from the
Okay.
Tulsi haters. But I just want to kind of get it out there. When they say, "Why can't you say war? Why does she always have to say regime change war? Why is it important to say regime change war in your opinion?"
So when Tulsi went, I think it was 2017, right after the election, she actually sat down with Congress and was trying to basically ask, why the hell have we been directly involved in the regime change of over 60 countries? Like, over the course of a year. So 60 different regimes.
Mm-hmm.
And those are just the ones with direct influence, not even the wars that we caused or that we fought, not even the indirect influence in other regime changes. And she was very specific about these instances are the thing this is what we participate in more than anything else. Attempts to change another country's regime and then manipulate that government. And the reason that you have to say regime change war is because, well, if you're trying to solve the problem that exists today, then that is your problem. There's only really two types of wars that have been fought since World War One, which is, I think it's maybe one exception, but even that I'm not even sure is an exception, which is regime change war and economic war. The thing is, the economic wars are usually just a subcategory of regime change war. It's a part of a regime change war. So if you say end all wars, what does that mean? It can mean, yeah, end all hot wars. But realistically, that's like kind of it's the way that it comes off when you're speaking politically. It comes off like you don't know what you're talking about. You don't know the intricacies of war. You're just saying, oh, peace, and everybody be nice, and everybody just pretend like, you know, all the world's militaries don't exist, and hope that things just work out for the best. That doesn't really get the job done when you're trying to show people that you're not just, you know, some hippie beatnik. You're actually speaking from an educated perspective. Using the term regime change as you should in every other situation gives you very specific issue. And when the way you conquer the issue of regime change war, which is a subcategory of war, you tackle the qualifier, which is you offer a solution for the qualifier, which is regime change. So if you stop the regime change, will there be more war? If you stop the regime change, will there still be economic warfare? We don't know, but probably not, right? Why are, we're trying to initiate regime change in Iran, yet we can't for some reason stop sanctioning them. We know we're trying to initiate regime change in Venezuela, and for whatever reason, we can't stop sanctioning them. We were trying to issue regime change. We successfully, I don't know if you want to call it regime change, but we tried to end the regime in Libya, couldn't stop sanctioning. I mean, the list, Syria, same thing, over and over and over again. And yet we'll find that dictators that do commit atrocities, like, for example, I wish I could remember his name. The quote unquote president of Chad, while Gaddafi was in power, was one of ours. And people didn't know that. That man was committing atrocities and funding terrorists that would, of course, then go and fight at the border, where Gaddafi would be forced to defend himself, very similar to what we're seeing in Syria. And then they would say, oh, look at him, he's committing atrocities. And they only ever mention one side of that of regime change and never really mention the other side. And so what Tulsi is saying, and what she's concluded, which is the right conclusion, if we get rid of regime change wars, then every modern war that we ever fought would not have been fought. And going forward, if there is a war to be fought, it won't be because of the United States irresponsibly trying to get rid of regimes that we don't like or that don't play ball with us.
I think a lot of people think that regime change war was everything post World War II. They think it was like a new concept kind of created. I think it's so descriptive. It's like I always talk about it in the sense of a restaurant. If I'm going to open up a restaurant today, I'm going to open up a restaurant, I'm going to call it roast. And you're going to understand what we're doing. We might have roast beef, roast turkey, roast coffee. The concept is in the name. And I think that the fact that Tulsi does say it, and when she says regime change war, she gets the mind thinking about, okay, regime change, is that what it's all about? Because there's this argument that people say, why can't you just say war? All war is bad. But when I've seen protests that are just protesting against war, they're not as big, the protests, as the ones that are specific, as saying, all right, we're stopping war against Libya, against regime change in Libya, where it would be a much bigger protest and a lot more people would come out. So it seems to be more descriptive, and I think that's better in itself, and that's why I like regime change war. Let's get to the topic.
I'm all about descriptive. I'm all about like using the most specific definition you can. It just makes you look like you know what you're talking about, and we need to. It kind of helps people understand why, without explaining to them, it helps them understand why we're engaging in these wars. It's not just a war, because if you just say war, it makes you think that we're defending ourselves, because that's what we've been programmed to believe as a citizen of the US. You say regime change wars, it lets you know that, oh no, we're going somewhere else and trying to take over their country or trying to influence their country. And most people in the United States would be against that now, and historically have really always been against that.
I'm going to use that, what you just said right there, as a clip point right there. I'm going to clip that up and put that on the Twitter later, because that is beautiful, Nico. Let's get to World War I and let's get to your theory. So basically, in high school, I think it was freshman year, we started World War I. Some people might have got into it a little bit in 8th grade.
You ain't that old. I thought that I was like, you started World War I in high school. Pasta, you've been lying to me about your age.
No, I think we started World War I maybe a little bit in 8th grade. We might have talked about it vague. We kind of went over, but in 9th grade, freshman year, we dove into it a little bit more. So pretty much what I have is a map, and I'm going to put the map up real quick. It's a basic map right over here, and you'll see it describes the Triple Entente and the Central Powers. Central Powers being Germany, Austria-Hungary, Bulgaria, eventually Turkey entered the war versus those were the Central Powers versus the Triple Entente, which were pretty much France, I got to say Serbia, Montenegro, and then Russia. And of course, Britain entered the war. And Italy, who stayed neutral, who we thought would be with the Central Powers, eventually went to the Triple Entente because they wanted to get some land in Greece. And then Turkey, the Ottoman Empire, eventually joined the Central Powers. And we were always taught that it was always about, and I have another graph that shows the three circles, whatnot. We were always taught that it was all about Austria-Hungary declaring war because a Serbian militant of the Black Hand had killed the Archduke Franz Ferdinand. It was a shot heard around the world. And then Austria-Hungary made some damage to Serbia with the backing of Germany. And then all shit broke loose. Russia backed Serbia. And then France joined in. And then Germany figured they were going to take out France first and then swing their troops and concentrate on over to Russia. And by doing so, they went through Belgium. But Belgium said no. All shit broke loose over there. And then in the Western Front is where we saw trench warfare. And everything went crazy. The war was split on two ends. Eventually, the Ottoman Empire and Russia fought a very bloody war, and Russia had a revolution, overthrew the Bolsheviks. The Tsars were out, and they stopped. They exited the war.
Russia, they got the shit end. I mean, both Germany and Russia did, and that's part of the story. That Russia and Germany both got put in impossible positions, and that was not coincidence that the two largest powers in the region got put in those type of compromising positions where you were fighting on two different fronts and it was almost impossible to win.
Yeah. But we were always taught too, Nico, that this was about the Industrial Revolution. This is about all empires kind of folding, and then people were making alliances in Europe. So when all hell broke loose, it was all about these alliances where these people were signed in to back these other countries. And I think in the beginning of the war, they didn't use too much of the Navy. Germany had this big Navy, but they started going after Great Britain economically. So they started sinking everything in the waters. And then supposedly the Lusitania was sunk and the United States was drawn into the war, came on over to the Western Front, finished them off. The Treaty of Versailles was then signed very shortly after, really sacking Germany. And they all promised not to enter into a big war ever again. And the burden of the war was put on Germany and Austria-Hungary, which was broken up into Poland, Czechoslovakia, all these countries right now. And they all promised not to do it again, like they said. But 20 years later, World War II came along. Wasn't this war just about really the powers swinging in Europe and whatnot, and the Industrial Revolution to see who had more strength? Because I understand that United States entered the war late like they did in World War II, and by doing so, they gained a lot of economic growth because they funded and sold weapons to Great Britain and France, I believe.
Yeah, so even if we would have entered earlier first, that would have happened because we were in the middle of our Industrial Revolution. I want to say we were damn near peaking at this point. Because when did World War I actually start? Like, when was the first bullet fired?
Wasn't it 1914? Shot heard around the
like
world?
19th, yeah. And so you got to think about it leading up to 1920. Like, that was, the what we call the Roaring 20s. So we were like booming economically. New York was on fire, not literally, but like was growing incredibly. The steel industry and the Rust Belt they were killing it. So we were going to make money regardless. So I got to start at the beginning. So we like the conversation is always, for whatever reason, surrounded by Archduke Franz Ferdinand. That's the first thing that you're taught in school. It's weird, right? Because I feel like everybody remembers that name damn near as much as, like, when you think of the World Wars, you think of Archduke Franz Ferdinand and Hitler. Like, that's what you think of. If you're like just remembering from grade school, and you would think that your memory of what happened with Archduke Franz Ferdinand would be as clear as your memory and reasoning for entering the war based off of what Hitler did. Like, I know Hitler murdered a lot of Jews and he was a little bit problematic and he was crazy. Like, I even know about how Hitler overthrew the government, which is a different conversation. I'm like, I remember it being in school and they were like, you need to know this for your test. How did World War I start? With the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. But I would, and I'm sure like many of you did, you raise your hand if you were inquisitive. You're like, hold up, teacher, that don't make no sense. What do you mean? I thought you just said the main fighters of World War I were United States, Germany, Russia, France, and they were like, well, just know for them. Like, no, that's not gonna work. It's not gonna work. I need to know who this Archduke guy is. Like, was he like the heir to something big? Like, was he the heir to the German throne or like the heir to the Russian throne or something like that? No, not really. So he was just an Archduke. Yep. I think so. An Archduke started an entire world war. Doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. You're absolutely correct. Even his assassination is almost like glossed over because that wasn't the first assassination attempt on Archduke Franz Ferdinand. It was, I think, the second or the third one.
Yeah.
The first attempt was actually not even. Well, it was only months before the actual assassination took place, where there was like a bomb that was laid out that was supposed to explode, but the driver avoided it. The bomb
I think that
still
was
went
days
off.
before.
Yeah, it was very, very soon before.
Yeah.
And Archduke Franz Ferdinand went to visit all the victims and all that good stuff, but I guess he wasn't the brightest because he went back out into the public the very next day.
Yeah.
Everybody and their mama knew his route. The security was trashed, and of course, he was eventually assassinated.
Open car, by the way.
Open car.
Open car.
Yep. After an assassination attempt against him. Yep.
Yeah. So I always thought they were putting him out there as bait, like as sheep, like somebody wanted him killed.
That is exactly what it was. See, the lead up to this is probably the most important thing because it started before 1914. It was started in the late 1800s, and it started with a guy named Cecil Rhodes. A lot of you may be familiar with him for several different reasons. The Rhodes Scholarship is the main reason that most of the young people know about who he is. A lot of you might know him from South Africa.
Exactly.
That a lot of y'all might know him from that. However, the real history of Cecil Rhodes is one where he formed a quote unquote secret society that wasn't really all that secret. He worked with the Rothschilds and a few other people. One of the guys' name was William Steed. That's actually a really important name. But basically, a lot of people would assume like, oh, this is secret society, it's conspiracy, this is silly. Yeah, except for it wasn't all that secret. New York Times actually reported on this in 1902, after like maybe days after the death of Cecil Rhodes, and they were like, "Hey, everybody, shouldn't we be paying attention to this? This guy literally said he wanted to create a secret society, and it looks like all the pieces have already been put into place to do what he wants to do." The goal of that secret society was to create an Anglo-dominant empire all over the world. Now, the perfect place to test this would be in a place that has a lot of resources, a place that couldn't really put up a fight, and a place that has such a diametrically different culture from the Anglo-Saxon world that it would be an interesting test to see if you could implement Anglo culture or British culture specifically in this particular situation. And that would be South Africa. South Africa had diamonds amongst other resources. Cecil Rhodes and a couple of his colleagues saw an opportunity there. So they ignited a war. The details are convoluted, but moral of the story is they started a war after saying that the society was to bring peace. So it was a lie. The Brits took over their company, like it was a British conglomerate that ran it. Of course, Cecil Rhodes was in charge of that as well, or he was like one of the executives as well. And I believe he was even the leader of South Africa until he died. So if you've noticed, if you needed any proof of whether or not what their goal was from this conspiracy, South Africa, Trevor Noah people, he's from South Africa. He speaks with a British accent. That's the reason, because for maybe two generations or three generations, that's what they were raised to speak. Even Afrikaner, if you speak Afrikaner, you still generally have a British accent. And that was the first test, and it worked. And then Great Britain's corporations and the corporations from the United States all set up shop there. That was the first apartheid state. So you fast
This
forward.
is in South Africa.
This is all in South Africa.
Okay.
But this is a precursor that showed, hey, we can actually do this. And so you fast forward to about 1902. Fortunately, but unfortunately for him, in the circle, Cecil Rhodes died. But he was a man. He was a man of the master plan. And before he died, he actually left his plan in a will, a bunch of wills that were published. They were published by a guy named William T. Stead. Rhodes said that he laments the loss of America. Oh yeah, it gets good, and they should form a secret society to bring them back into Great Britain, because that's the only way that they would be able to successfully dominate the world and concentrate most of the wealth into that particular group. So Cecil Rhodes concocted a plan to get America back into the British Empire. William T. Stead actually was a publisher, and he published all the volumes of this will. So this is, once again, this isn't some crazy conspiracy. This is in the New York Times talked about this. That the title of that article in the New York Times is called "Rhodes' Ideal of Anglo-Saxon Greatness." William T. Stead published all the wills, and so the plan was already in place. Now, Rhodes initially got his idea to start dominating other countries because of the threat that Germany posed and Russia. This is, mind you, this is in the middle of the Industrial Revolution. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
That, you know, that everybody knows the cliche about German engineering being the best.
Yeah.
Well, that's because in the early 1900s and late 1800s, Germany was killing everybody in the Industrial Revolution. It was a thing. On top of that, Russia was strong industrial allies with Germany. So not only industrially was Great Britain getting smacked around, but if Great Britain dared to fight either Germany or Russia, they were going to get throttled, especially because we know they would back each other up, not only because of their economic ties, but Wilhelm II, who was is it the Kaiser? He was the Kaiser of Germany and Prussia. And he had been for quite some time. And then Nikolai II or something like that. It's one of those two. It's Nicholas I and Nicholas II. Anyway, he was the second cousin of the Kaiser of Germany. So the leader of Russia and the leader of Germany were literally related. And you know how the old ways worked. You don't attack. That's the whole thing. You got a family member in another, country. You don't attack that country.
Yeah.
However, how do you get people to start attacking? How do you force two countries into attacking each other?
Yeah. All right.
You gotta get the allies.
Yeah, of course. Let me digress for a second, because I want to get this right now, what you're saying. So Cecil Rhodes, late 1800s. And now I know who Cecil Rhodes is. I always laughed at, Rachel Maddow is a Rhodes Scholar. Pete Buttigieg is a Rhodes Scholar. You know what Cecil Rhodes was all about?
A lot of the tools are.
He was about Anglo-Saxon dominance within the whole worldwide. So that's who those people are. That's when you talk about this secret society today. You got to look at people like Rachel Maddow, what she's doing, and Pete Buttigieg, what she's all about. They're descendants of the Rhodes Scholar. So you say Cecil Rhodes set up shop with the diamonds in Africa, and they pretty much recolonized. They had regime change to control the diamond trade, whatnot, and everything in South Africa for many years. So seeing what happened, he said, okay, we have to do the same thing now in Europe, and we got to somehow get America back with Britain.
Oh, not just in Europe, all over the world.
Okay, but the next spot was Europe, obviously. He was eyeing Europe because he said
they moved all up and down the African coast, actually.
But getting the United States back with Britain was one of his goals. In other words,
yes.
That was a big goal, which it played out in World War I, obviously, because we joined Great Britain to go over there and fight on the Western Front. All right, so now he's setting up shop. He dies, but he leaves it in his will. Johnny just pulled it up. We pulled the article. We saw all the stuff. That is some great stuff for people to look into. Please go ahead now. So now we're in the 1900s. Cecil Rhodes is dead, but his plan is ready and intact.
And what's happening over in Europe at this point? Right now, America's kind of chilling. Unfortunately, the Titanic gets sank at some point. That sucked. But America
Civil War
is Civil
War ended not too long ago.
Yeah, but actually so it was 1912 or 1910 to 1914. So it was a little bit after the Civil War, but we were tired of war. I'll put it like that. We were kind of exhausted from war, and one thing we were not going to do, absolutely not going to do under any circumstance, is go to fight somebody else. We're not fighting anybody else's war. The hell with that. That's not what we do as Americans. So that's a problem for Cecil Rhodes, who knew that first of all, if you're going to win the war, you need America to be there. But two, if you want to bring America back into the fold as far as being a part officially of the British Empire and all their strategic maneuvers, you have to have America into that war. Mm-hmm. So the campaign started. All of a sudden, you got in this circle, and I can't remember all their names, so forgive me there. But like I said, you had William T. Stead, who was a publisher. You had Rothschild, who he was the banking system in Europe. If you don't know that, I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah.
Then you had Cecil Rhodes himself, and you actually some other characters that came into fruition down the line. A lot of people would have never thought had any connection to Great Britain.
Who? Give me him.
Pierpont Morgan, also known as J.P. Morgan, who actually got his start at a bank in London. Yes, that's where he got his initial start, and then he came to the United States and then made the rest of his money, probably possibly the most illustrious banking career next to the Rothschild family. He made his money through the robber barons. Jeez. That's how he got rich. So, and he at this point already, he had all but a little bit of the control of the United States economy, because that's just the kind of power he had amassed at that point. So J.P. Morgan worked with the Rothschilds and another guy named it's his Colonel House. I can't remember his first name. I want to say it's Edward or Edwin House or something to that.
He's related to Nico House.
No, he's not. No, he's not. Lying like that. But
Colonel House got it.
Look, I freaked out too. I went to go look at his family history. But so this Colonel House, so this guy,
yeah,
he actually was part of a slave owner family, and they were a pretty big name in this southern slave trade, and they were directly connected to Great Britain. And that network was passed down to Colonel House. Guess who Colonel House's mentee was? The guy that he mentored since the 1800s. Woodrow Wilson. So you have the largest banker in America in the circle, in Cecil Rhodes circle, working with Rothschild, and you also had a guy who was connected back to the British establishment and British royalty in House, who became Woodrow Wilson's number one advisor. Woodrow Wilson, obviously, as you all know, ran on being an isolationist. That's what he ran on. That's what he got elected on the first time. Now, because you ran on that, you now have to do something that we had never seen done before. And so this is the first time it's happened. You have to start manufacturing consent. Absolutely. So the circle brings all of their resources together for the first time. Like, this is where this test started. And who was the king at the time? Is it James? I want to say it was King James.
No, LeBron James was a freshman in high school there, so he wasn't ready.
I want to say it was King James II. Don't quote me on that. I want to say it was King James, though.
Are we talking about World War I?
Yes,
we're talking around that time. We're talking about Europe, right? We're talking about Great Britain.
Great Britain's king. I want to say it was King James. I feel like it was. But anyway, he has a conversation.
King George V of Great Britain.
King George. Okay,
thank you, Darren Levy. He's always there for us.
Appreciate you. So he had a conversation with Colonel House, who wasn't actually a colonel, by the way. He just gave himself that name to make himself seem cooler. But he had a conversation with Colonel House, and it was very, very specific. It was, man, you know what? I wonder how Americans will react if we sank the Lusitania. Like, that was a legitimate conversation. And like an hour later or so, it happened. Now, we were told for a long time that was an American passenger ship and there was a bunch of innocent people on it. Yeah, that was a lie. That was a lie. In 2014, the documents were released, and it showed that that was actually a ship. That was an armored ship that was an auxiliary warship that literally had a bunch of weapons on it, and it was part of Great Britain's fleet.
Mm-hmm. And at the time, Germany was sinking all those ships out there. They were trying to blockade, stop.
Exactly. Now, here's the thing. Part of the propaganda campaign, as you all should well know by now, was manufacturing consent. So the goal was you blame everything on Great Britain. I mean, not Great Britain, excuse me, Germany. You blame everything. Everything.
Germany was Russia.
What about this? Yeah. Germany. Everything is Germany's fault. Yeah. What if they're innocent? Doesn't matter. Germany. Yeah. Another propaganda campaign they went on, because at this point, World War I had basically sparked off. Whenever Germany attacked Belgium, there was a propaganda campaign. I don't know if you all are familiar with the Babies on Bayonets campaign that said that they slaughtered all these kids. And sound familiar?
It does sound familiar.
They killed all those. They slaughtered all those kids.
Well, there was a big thing.
We gotta get involved now.
It was a big thing. They were cutting through Belgium to get to France to flank them, and while they went through there, they committed mass atrocities, is what we were told.
Well,
because Belgium didn't want them let go through.
That was a lie. There was obviously the normal atrocities that war brings about, but then we started lying and said that they were raping and pillaging and killing babies and cutting off babies' heads, and it turned out that that was not true. There was nobody allowed to get an on-the-ground account of from Belgian people. Nobody. The only account came from like a former ambassador to Great Britain that was working in America, who was one of those well-liked guys that everybody believes. You know, one of the bright faces that everybody's like, if he said it, it must be true. That was the only account that was taken into account before formulating this propaganda campaign and taking it as fact. And then it was later, of course, disproven. But that was starting to get people's emotions involved. What do we see in Syria right now? Oh, he bombed the babies. He bombed the kids. He bombed
Iraq with the babies in the incubators, all that stuff. To get
I forgot
involved,
about that.
We found out a lie. Yeah. Because that part of World War I always confused me, because Belgium was neutral and Germany had hoped that Belgium would align with them. They were only cutting through Belgium as a shortcut to go around and flank the army. So I was always confused when I said they were committing atrocities in Belgium. Like, why would they do that when they wanted Belgium to be a strategic ally? Why would they start that, especially when it was very important for them to cut through to try to flank the army. Mm-hmm. But I think if I had a time machine to go back, I'd like to go to Belgium and see what really went on over there. Maybe it was the Allied forces.
There was definitely a military occupation of some kind. Like there's probably some shots fired. Like I doubt that they would be able to get through without shots being fired. But when you build up this narrative of a neutral country getting invaded, and babies' heads are getting cut off. Oh my God, it's a neutral country. Those are innocent people. It draws this emotional reaction. And once again, like you just pointed out, strategically, it made no sense. Why would you do that?
Yeah. And it's almost like Assad gassing his people. Seen. Like, why would he do that when they're retreating?
Right when he's about to win the war.
Exactly.
They were literally about to win. And they were like, yeah, he gassed kids. But that's the one thing that would get us into the war. Well, yeah, but it's just a coincidence though.
Yep.
Like, no, that's not. It wasn't a coincidence. So now Germany. So now you have successfully, obviously, brought Germany into the war, but also because of the factors that you mentioned earlier, Russia is in the war, but unfortunately, Germany and Russia are not on the same team.
Yeah,
which they weren't. But once again, you think they wanted it that way? No, they had to handle business. In fact, leading up to the war, and I encourage you all to go look through these the telegrams. They're called the Nicky Willy telegrams. It documents all the conversations that they had leading up to the war between the Tsar of Russia and the Kaiser of Germany. And because, like I said, they were cousins. They were actually close.
Can I, Nico, for 1 second, just because somebody had left a super chat and it's talking exactly about what you were talking about, and I just want to thank them because this is a good one tonight. It's by Darren Levy, who said King George V, Kaiser Wilhelm, and the Tsar Nicholas are all cousins, all grandsons of the Queen Victoria. World War I equals cousins more. So thank you, Darren Levy, for the super chat contribution.
Absolutely.
But it's going on what you're talking about. Like, all these people are related, all these elites are related all over the place, and yet they're still going to war with each other.
Well, with Nicky and Willie, it was crazier because like they were really strong economic allies, but the problem, once again, the treaties. You gotta you gotta maintain your treaties. Like that's just that's especially back then. That was the only way that you could be held accountable by other countries. And this is still like I would say, with when you're talking about the combination of Prussia, Russia, the British Empire, and the Ottoman Empire, like the only thing that, like, if you didn't have your word didn't mean anything, then your treaty didn't mean anything. And so this is like a mixture between the old ways and the new ways that were coming into fruition at the time. So what happened next was that we needed to obviously have Woodrow Wilson come into power. Woodrow Wilson was not a very inspiring guy. He was not. But you know who was pretty inspiring? That boy Teddy Roosevelt. Teddy Roosevelt and that Bull Moose party that was so celebrating. Like, man, he was so popular that he almost won. He almost beat the Republicans. That's what we're told. Yeah, except for what they don't tell you is that, J.P. Morgan bankrolled that party so that they can get the candidate that Wall Street actually wanted in power, which is Woodrow Wilson. And Wall Street also had an incentive because they wanted a central bank, which Woodrow Wilson gave them. So that also was a key. Exactly. It was also a key factor in us going to war without without going bankrupt doing so. So we got the central bank. The war is well underway in Europe. And then what happened next? Give me a second. Oh, so then we entered the war after. Was it the Lusitania? No, it wasn't Lusitania that drove us into war.
No, it was the telegram intercepted that was sent to Mexico saying, "Unite with us, and we'll give you back your land." That was like the last straw. It was intercepted by British intelligence, sent to Mexico, and once we got a hold of that, we were like, "Hell no!"
Yeah, and it was some fishy business even with that, by the way. And I can't recall what it was at the time, but there's some fishy business even with that. I think there was some unclassified files that just dropped a few years back that said that even that was BS. But they needed, basically what they needed to do was to have Woodrow Wilson serve his first 4 years and keep his promise so that when he ran again, that he could be like, look, I kept us out of the war like I promised. Don't worry. I'm not going to go fight their war. We're good. We're fine. Yeah, that's the first thing he did once he got reelected. The Bull Moose Party guaranteed his reelection, actually, which was the goal. Split up the Republican vote. And Woodrow Wilson was played like a fiddle. We go into World War I, and it was with the ultimate goal of ensuring that, because at the time, once again, context, our greatest economic enemy, the Anglo-economic enemy, was Germany.
Yes, by far.
And Germany was working with Russia, who was also a great economic enemy to Great Britain.
Yeah,
not a real one, but an economic one. And they knew that if Germany was allowed to progress unfettered, they would probably end up where America is right now. Also, just as I think it's worth to mention that Germany was heavily represented in America as far as the citizens are concerned. It was like 50% of the country had some type of direct connection to Germany. So like it was extremely hard to manufacture this consent.
United States.
Yes.
There was a lot of Germans in the United States.
A lot of Germans. Absolutely.
Who was in power there? Was it the Kaiser or?
Back then it was the Kaiser. It was Kaiser Willem II. Yeah. So, but we knew that if we have the Kaiser there, Kaisers are not necessarily democratically elected, right? Yeah. So you gotta completely destroy that system, obliterate it, so that they fall so far behind that they will almost never be able to catch up.
Yeah.
So we scapegoated Germany every single step of the way, and eventually, as you all know, Kaiser Wilhelm was killed. And the treaties of Versailles kicked in, and basically we limited their army to basically nothing. Their economy was shot to hell, and Germany took the blame for the war. It was never Germany's fault. I'm not saying the Kaiser was innocent in one form or another, because he's a Kaiser, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure he had his demons and his skeletons in his closet, but as far as World War I is concerned, that was Cecil Rhodes and his circle that started that war, and that was the first regime change war. And it did exactly what regime change wars do now. destabilized the country, got rid of their standing military, and ensured that there would not be immediate competition for the Western powers going forward.
So we can almost say maybe that the hit job of the Archduke Franz Ferdinand might have been an inside job. Lusitania, we know there was a lot of evidence, an inside job.
Yeah.
Maybe even the telegram intercepted, inside job to crush the German society, the government, change it, complete them, and then to kind of further back your theory, we economically struck them down so hard, we put the burden of the war on them. So we turned their whole system upside down, and that is the regime we wanted changed because they were a big economic power before the war, but after the war, they were in bad trouble.
Yeah, and then what happened next? Obviously, the United States and Great Britain was actually trashed after World War I. However, that was fine because the United States, who, everybody in power at that time was under Great Britain's authority de facto. So we had about 20,000 new millionaires and billionaires created after World War I. They put together a war advisory board or a war powers board, where basically their whole job was to create different ways to keep a wartime economy around. That's for those of you who knows Prescott Bush.
Mm-hmm.
George W. Bush's grandfather. I don't think it's his great grandfather. I think it's
I think it's his grandfather. I think it's George Senior's grandfather.
Yep.
George. It's
George. I think it's George. No.
You think Prescott was Senior's father?
Think about it. George H.W. is what, 80 something?
I don't know, but I know he likes to paint.
Well, let me see George H.W.'s name. George.
Well, Johnny's looking it up right now.
Or age.
You're right. Senior, yeah. George Senior. This aggression will not stand by Iraq. This aggression will not stand. Dad, his father was Prescott, so W's grandfather.
He's 94 years old.
And I believe they sold a ton of rubber during World War II to the Nazis. And he just bankrolled his whole empire during World War II. He really built it big, Prescott.
When you really think about it, with George H.W., CIA, right? Or the FBI? CIA director or FBI? CIA, right?
He was the director of the CIA.
Yeah, so you had CIA.
Which he denied because at that time there weren't a lot of close proof and ties. I think there was one letter that was floating around that showed he was the director of the CIA.
Yeah, and so then, of course, he ended up in everything he's ever touched, war. Everything his dad's ever touched, war. George W. Bush gets us into another, that war was still going on. Literally, and that's just one member of that board. And look at what his children did. So, for those of you that want to understand the implications of this, what did this mean? Well, if you're trying to understand how Hitler was able to galvanize people, I feel like a lot of people probably question, okay, you can't just point at Jewish people and be like, oh man, we should go to war because Jewish people suck and then we should kill them and everybody should be okay with it. That makes no sense when you really think about it, because that's not how people work. There has to be a catalyst for you to believe that. Here's what the catalyst was. We were lied to about how World War I started. We were lied to in the United States, and it was very easy to do that. You could keep Rothschild's name completely separate from the conversation, and if you're going to blame anybody, as far as the conspiracy is concerned, if you want to blame anybody, just blame J.P. Morgan. Everybody will believe you. Because they believe that he was the one who directly caused the stock market crash. He worked with his banker friends to do it because they all benefited from it. They know that he was the one who was propping up the robber barons. So if you blame Pierpont Morgan, then people would absolutely believe you. However, Rothschild was kind of this foreign name that a lot of people weren't aware had that much control over Europe at the time, at least their banking system. They didn't, and they damn sure didn't know, at least at large, that he was part of that circle with Cecil Rhodes. But Germany did. Europe already was irritated at the Rothschild family because they bankrolled almost every major war for 200 years before that instance. So they know exactly what Rothschild does. And so if you're Hitler, who do you blame? Rothschild, and you can then say, oh, look at all the Jewish people connected to him. It's their fault. That's how. Remember, this is a Germany in economic distress for 20 years because they were falsely blamed. Who initiated the blame game? Who initiated the process that caused them to lose millions of lives, millions of their own German lives, killed their economy for doing nothing but being successful in a free market? It was technically Rothschild and his friends.
Yeah.
So now you're talking about that regime change is directly connected to the Holocaust. And in a twisted fucking sense of irony, then Rothschild bankrolls Israel, saying that the Holocaust is the reason we need that country. With the main road in Tel Aviv being called Rothschild Ave or something to that extent.
Yeah. Somebody just put in the chat that World War I was to secure Palestine for the Rothschild. That was Mark of Melbourne and stuff. And if I remember correctly too, that one of the great sins that Hitler had committed is that he was starting his own currency as well. What was the Kruger something or
something like that?
Because I've heard Ken O'Keefe talk about it, and that was a big no to the Allied forces and whatnot, is that they weren't going to let this man start his own dollar backed in gold at all. It ain't happening. So that was another big sin of Hitler's as well.
Just being competition was the problem. Like literally just being competition. And so then you got to kind of, this is the part of the conversation that people need to understand as far as financing all the sides from the United States perspective. Nobody really ever asked either. Because like, remember the story we learned is the Treaty of Versailles. Germany's crippled. Yeah. No money, military, untrained and not official. Like, so if that's the case, where the hell did Hitler get the money to bankroll an entire war?
Yeah.
And the military and brand new uniforms and brand new colors and brand new flags. And like nobody really ever thought about that. But his money came from somewhere, ladies and gentlemen, and it was a lot of it from the United States. We had Nazi subsidiaries, Ford, GM, GE. And believe it or not, people. When we bombed them, America bombed those Nazi subsidiaries because they were like doing things like making machine guns and tanks and things like that for Germany. Those companies sued us, and those companies won. They won a lawsuit against the United States of America for bombing their Nazi subsidiaries. This is public record. Nobody never gets discussed. So if you understand how corporations work, then you know that. Well, first of all, this isn't the only instance of this. I don't know if y'all know this. Almost everywhere you find regime change war, you'll find these corporations. This is the case in South Africa. We were there. 93% of that land was owned by people who are in some way, form, or fashion affiliated with corporations from America or from Great Britain.
Yeah.
Cuba.
Yeah.
An apartheid state that never was called that. Because we couldn't call it that, because you remember what was happening in South Africa at the time. We were using the call of activists were using the call of apartheid to galvanize people into fighting back and joining that fight. And the reason that South Africa, one of the reasons that South Africa was obviously able to break those chains, at least start to break those chains, was because Fidel Castro was fighting on the side of Nelson Mandela. He was fighting with Nelson Mandela against the apartheid state. And the reason why is because they had that common experience of being an apartheid country. So like in America was fighting, by the way, against the apartheid.
Exactly. You have that great clip, Johnny, if you can find it real quick, where you have Nelson Mandela talking to Castro, and Castro sitting down. He's an elder Castro, and Nelson Mandela is like, I don't want to hear anything. When are you coming to my country? You have to come be my guest. What you did for us was awesome. Come to my country. And Castro's like, oh, please. And he's like, no. I don't want to hear it. I want you to come to Africa. Please, Castro. It's a great clip, and it was all about the apartheid state. A lot of people don't know about it.
Then that's what we did. I mean, we've been doing it ever since. Even we use Russia. We didn't even fire a damn bullet at least officially at a Russian soldier, and yet We were like at a Cold War with Russia, never actually shot a bullet at Russia, but guess what we did? We used Russia as an excuse to go into Vietnam, to go into Korea, to go into Afghanistan, to go into Iran, to go into Eastern Europe, even parts. I guess technically some of it would be considered Eastern Europe, and part of it is now part of the Middle East, and that's a whole different thing. But we use the Cold War once again. Look at what we're doing right now. Have we fired a bullet at Russia? Not officially. However, Russia's working with Assad, so we have to stay in Syria, right? Well, Russia wants to invade Crimea, so we have to stay in Eastern Europe, because what happens if Russia doesn't like Ukraine, and we have Ukraine's scared, so we have to help Ukraine.
Yeah,
we initiated regime change in Ukraine.
We did
because and we use whatever excuse we use.
It was mainly we used Russia too as the excuse,
and
you know what I'm saying. It was all about being a proxy against Russia. The Ukraine situation, which is not talked about enough, which was a regime change on live television, backed and funded by the EU, George Soros, and then you had Obama, Biden, Adam Schiff was deep in there, Nancy Pelosi, just raping the country of their energy and their resources so corporations and oligarchs can make that money and not the people of Ukraine.
Ukraine was actually one of the last countries admitted into the EU because of their corruption, if I recall. Yeah. And it was also easier for the Western countries to take advantage of the Ukraine if they weren't part of the EU.
Yep.
They were one of the most successful countries, and they were also known for their foreign direct investment. The Ukraine, Bulgaria, and I'm missing one, Romania, were all known for their foreign direct investments, primarily from Western countries. And it made it much easier to do that by keeping their governments corrupt, and like you said, raping and pillaging their resources. And so we've used that same exact playbook over and over and over and over. The reason that we went into Grenada, a lot of you know about the bombing of Grenada, and we killed Maurice Bishop. I actually know the person who did it, believe it or not. It's a different conversation for a different day. Not one on YouTube either, but I know the person who did it. And he admitted that they were lied to. And it was under the belief that, Batista's a communist, therefore we have to destroy him. He's bad for the country. Of course, what was his sins? Wanted to desegregate, wanted to give guaranteed health care to everybody, wanted to guarantee quality education for everybody, staying out of U.S. imperialist wars. The reason that we were in Trinidad then and are still in Trinidad is because the insane amount of oil in that region that a lot of people don't think about or even know exists, which is also by design, by the way. In the Middle East, you can't really hide that fact. In Central and South America, in the Caribbean in general, we needed launch pads, because you can't just walk up in Venezuela. They did learn something from Vietnam. They're like, bro, that's a jungle. We can't mess with that. We got to figure out a way to attack them from the sea and take it from there. But even then, you're still playing with fire, trying to just directly invade Venezuela or directly invade Brazil or even directly invade Colombia. Colombia played ball. That's why their government's corrupt, because we're basically in charge of their current government. Brazil now plays ball. We've been going back and forth with Brazil throughout basically since they've ended slavery.
That's why we put Lula in jail. Exactly. Lula wasn't playing ball with us, but Bolsonaro plays ball.
Bolsonaro plays ball. And if you wonder why, you're like, because I know, once again, these questions that you've always had, but I guess have never probably known where to start looking. How the hell can Brazil have the same type of agriculture opportunities as we have, but even probably more? They have a better climate than we have. Yeah. They have the same ethnic makeup, very similar history to us. So why the hell is their economy so unstable? It makes no sense, right? Well, we did that. Hell no. Brazil would be the most dominant country in the world right now if we didn't tone them down. Yeah. Economically, they would be, because they just have so much going in their favor. Their Brazilian soccer team was very comparative to our U.S. national basketball team, and so Brazil was part of ushering in the global brand of football or soccer. We are the part of ushering in the global brand of basketball. So they were benefiting from all of this stuff, and we would just cut them. We would cut them at the knees and be like, nah, nope. Destabilize their economy. we would go. We got into this free trade regulations. And that's, by the way, oxymoron. There's no such thing as a free trade regulation. But basically, for example, with sugarcane, between us and Brazil, we can produce 93% of the sugarcane in the world. However, we can produce more than Brazil can. But that's all they're allowed to produce. So if they try and produce more and then export more, they will be penalized by the World Trade Organization. So and who's in charge of the World Trade Organization de facto? It's us.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
and guess what? If they have austerity put on them, guess who's in charge of that? So
we are. I mean, I remember when Lula was talking and he was in prison and Glenn Greenwald went to speak to him. And, we talked about this just recently. And it was like the oligarchs just couldn't stand it. You know what I'm saying? The rich people of Brazil, they would see poor people at the airport and they couldn't stand it. He was taking the people and rising them up, housing, education, all that stuff. Yep. And we just said, no, we threw his ass in jail. Our Department of Justice worked with the Brazilian courts to throw him and get Bolsonaro there. And now everything in the Amazon is for sale, baby. At the end of the day, it's all the corporations back then.
Bruh, let me tell you. Now. I was looking for tickets to go to Brazil and looking up different vacation packages, right? They have
Without me?
Airbnbs.
If you going to Brazil, I'm going with you. Just made that. You ain't going to. Me and Johnny are coming to Brazil. Trip. We'll leave Fee behind, but the three of us, watch out Brazil. You ain't going to Brazil without me.
They had Airbnbs in the Amazon. I'm not joking. I was like, this got to be wrong. This can't be correct. Airbnbs in the Amazon are bullshit. You not. It was a cabin. So that lets you know, Bolsonaro's doing what we paid him to do. There's some real sick players, involved in all of this. And it's. People have to understand what we're dealing with. We're not dealing with normal people. I don't know how else to describe them other than evil. Very rarely are they misguided. Maybe you get to the lower levels, like some of the pawns, they might be misguided by the money. But there are some people who just like to see power in the hands of people, themselves personally and people like them, just so they can say they have it. Cecil Rhodes claimed that he started that secret society for world peace. And the only way he could do that was by dominating it. So, so I guess, but when we get right down to it, Henry Kissinger talked about the new world order very casually when he was in his meeting with Donald Trump. Like it was on the news. Like it was kind of weird how he talked about it so casually, but that also lets you know just how cocky these people are. And they always claim it's for what? Oh, if we just scare the hell out of everybody, it's for world peace, right?
Yeah.
But it's about the consolidation of power. And until all that power is consolidated, once all that power is eventually consolidated, then there will always be someone to challenge that power. And so it will be a nonstop cycle. And so at the end of the day, we got to make sure that we recognize the patterns that history has shown us. We are very privileged to live in a time where information is readily available to debunk any of the lies, and where information can't debunk the lies directly. Patterns throughout history should at least give us the ability to be skeptical and ask questions and wait to render judgment until all the facts do come out.
Yeah. Well, my opinion is this shit's been going on for too long. We got to start eating the rich. And I'm a good cook. I can tell you, I'm going to pan sear and braise them. We're going to make a nice barbecue sauce. We get a few of the rich and let it be seen, so we can calm these people down and bring them to heel. Nico, we got to get you out of here, but I want to read some super chat contributions really quick. We already read one from Darren Levy. Thank you so much. It says, Coconut Girl, Hawaii is a great example of regime change war.
I forgot about
yes, it
Hawaii.
is. The Kingdom of Hawaii, Marines, all that, the history. Another one from Two Leister says, farms, not war legislation would be great remedy problem without pointing out adversaries like Saudi Arabia. How to email you idea. Two Leister, you can always email us at theconvocouch@gmail.com. Of course, if you have anything to say, we always take a look at those things. And also, there's another super chat right here. It's from Kamshwari Kate. She says, make this a podcast, please. Man, we got the account. We should start making that a podcast. Is Nico still here with us? Nico, did you leave? Nico left. We lost Nico. No big deal. But we're going to wrap up the show. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Baltazar left one that said streamless. He's going to look into it, Baltazar. We'll take a look at it. Nico, you back on?
Yeah, I'm back on, man. Yeah, kicked me out for a second. I don't know what happened.
Well, it's the deep state. They're trying to get us. And there was one other question. There was no super chat, obviously, on Facebook, but I was kind of peeking over there. It says, Bill Clinton is another Rhodes Scholar. Did you know that?
What? What? Oh,
know
bruh. That's hilarious. The Hillary Clinton Rhodes Scholar?
God. Who knows with these people right nowadays?
I want to make sure that I want to make sure I get the specifics correct about the Rhodes Scholarship, but that's a scholarship to get you into Cambridge for, I don't know if it's for the entire 4 years or for like a 2-year, like where you study one Ivy League here and then go to Cambridge. But I do know a Rhodes Scholar, and they studied at Cambridge. So that's why I'm like, yo, it might have been Rhodes Scholarship.
Nico, some people want to know when you're going to get your stream back. They asked on our thing.
Man, look, I wish I knew.
Yeah, he disputed.
Hopefully in the next few days. If they got about 2 more days. So,
well, I don't know.
It should be relatively soon.
What was the excuse? What was the reason? What did they tell you? Was it the Rachel Maddow video or something? Or
it was a Rachel Maddow video, but that wasn't the excuse they told me during the stream.
Yeah,
that was after the stream. They told me during the stream that I was live streaming copyrighted content.
Yeah,
and it was just my face.
Rhodes Scholar, Rachel Maddow.
So the Rhodes,
Cecil Rhodes Scholar, Rachel Maddow.
Postgraduate award for students to study at Oxford. So literally, remember I told you what was Cecil Rhodes' goal? To bring in America into Great Britain again. What's the best way to do that without actually taking over America? Because you can't just fight them. That's not. It has to be willing. You have to be a willing participant. That's how that works. You do it by taking every single elite with the Cory Booker, another Rhodes Scholar, Pete Buttigieg, another Rhodes Scholar, a former president of Pakistan, another Rhodes Scholar. Oh man, that's crazy. Obviously, Rachel Maddow.
It's just for studying at Oxford. That's it. It's just a coincidence that all these people are connected to all these elitist Cecil Rhodes and these regime change plans back from World War I. It's just a coincidence.
And what's so scary about that to me is like people knew that Cecil Rhodes was involved in basically destroying South Africa and creating an apartheid state. And people were like, yeah, but I definitely want that Rhodes Scholar though. Just saying. Like people, like it's reached this level of prestige where people brag about it.
Yeah, I know.
And no one ever thinks of the history connected to that name.
Wow.
Or why does like I have to go to Oxford to use it? Well, yeah. But if you're going to get somebody and make them part of your team, the postgraduate degree, master's degree, PhD, that's the way to do it. You get to completely you get to craft the way they see the world through their critical lens, or at least what they believe is critical. So.
Well, Nico, this was a great conversation. This was an interesting conversation. We got to do this some more. I want to thank everybody for joining in to the Convo Couch a la MCSC Network, brother and sister stations. Not only is a colleague, but he's a great friend. Nico, thank you so much for joining us. And people are they're waiting. They're on pins and needles. They want you to get your stream back, and hopefully we'll get it back soon. And we got a lot of stuff, great stuff coming up. And in the next few months, we're going to start. This whole race is going to keep unfolding. This whole primary that's coming up, it's just amazing. It's entertaining, and I am so glad to be working with you, Nico.
Oh man, I appreciate you guys, and shout out to Johnny on the ones and twos as usual. Hey, follow me on Rockfin. In the meantime, if you have a Rockfin, follow me on Rockfin, ROKFIN.com/Nico. And as soon as I get my live stream back on YouTube, I will be sure to let you all know.
Yep. And we're there with him. We're building that platform for Pasta Jardula and Jonny Tsunami. Nico House with us. Convo out, everybody. See you in about an hour with Fiorella back on the couch.